Ever get the feeling you're like living someone else's life,
Yeah.
stuck following a script someone else wrote?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like yearning to break free and just write your own story.
Totally.
You're not alone if you feel that. And that's actually what made me think of Dead Poets Society.
Uh-huh.
We're doing a deep dive on it today.
A film.
It's a classic, and it's about way more than just a bunch of kids in, some fancy prep school.
Right.
It's about self-expression, finding your own voice, and even having the courage to, challenge things.
Yeah, to challenge the status quo.
Exactly. Whether that's like stuffy expectations in the classroom or even like society's rules,
It's interesting because it resonates in such a powerful way, and I think it's because it's not just a coming-of-age story.
Right.
It's a commentary on so much more. Conformity, education, How do we find the strength to be ourselves even when everything around us wants to put us in a box?
Yeah, and speaking of boxes, picture this. Welton Academy.
Oh, yeah.
This super elite, kind of uptight prep school, right? Tradition rules everything. Success. It's all about fitting in. These boys are basically like living their parents' dreams, not their own.
Right, on this very narrow path.
Exactly. But then John Keating walks in, this new English teacher.
Yes.
And he just flips their world upside down. He doesn't just teach poetry. He teaches them how to really live.
To question.
Yes, to think for themselves.
To embrace the beauty of imperfection.
And you know what's so fascinating about Keating? He doesn't just challenge like what the students think. He challenges their whole world.
Their worldview. Everything they thought they knew.
Exactly. He's all about carpe diem, seize the day, like live your life to the fullest, make your own choices.
Be the author of your own story.
Yes. And he inspires them to create this secret society.
The Dead Poets Society.
Yeah, a place where they can just be themselves, read poetry, explore their creativity.
Without judgment.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, it wouldn't be a very good story if everything was easy, right?
Right.
Enter Neil.
Neil.
This kid is so passionate about acting,
Mm-hmm.
but his dad, overbearing, doesn't even begin to cover it.
Controlling, right.
No, totally. His entire future, already planned out.
By his father, of course.
Yep. And Neil's just supposed to follow it. No questions asked.
Yeah. And that right there, that's where it gets real. Neil's story, it's tragic, but it's also kind of beautiful.
Yeah.
It shows you what can happen when you stifle your true self.
It's that pressure to conform.
The expectations. To meet everyone else's needs but your own. It's powerful. But you know what else is powerful? Self-discovery. And that struggle. That's what makes Dead Poets Society so, so compelling.
It's like you can feel that tension building.
Well, absolutely. From the very beginning.
Yeah, the whole movie. It's like watching a pressure cooker just waiting for it to blow.
Yeah.
Keating's encouraging these boys to question everything.
Mind what you're passionate about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even if it means like going against the grain,
Rocking the boat.
Exactly. But then there's this weight, right? Of tradition, of everyone's expectation, all bearing down on them.
And that's exactly what's so powerful about it. It's freedom butting up against constraint. Authenticity versus like doing what's expected.
And isn't that something we all deal with?
Oh, 100%. It's like, how much of ourselves do we actually show the world versus how much do we keep hidden?
Right.
Because we're afraid of being judged.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, even just thinking back to some of the scenes in this film, like when Keating makes them rip out the introduction of their poetry textbook.
Such a good scene.
Right. He's not just saying, forget the rules. He's basically showing them they have the power to decide how they feel about art.
About knowledge.
About everything.
About the world around them. And that scene, it's so symbolic, right?
Totally.
It's like this rejection that there's only one way to think. One right way to interpret. One right way to just be,
Yeah.
Keating's like, forget that. Don't just accept what you're told. Find your own voice. Find your own meaning.
Find your own way to carpe diem, right?
Exactly.
Seize the day. Grab life by the horns.
It's also about being intentional, It's not just recklessness.
Oh, absolutely.
It's about making choices that actually mean something to you. Choices that line up with who you are, what you want.
And that's scary sometimes, right?
It can be terrifying.
Because it means taking risks.
Yeah.
Stepping outside your comfort zone. It might even mean challenging everything you thought you knew about yourself.
Challenging the people you love.
Yes. And we see that with Neil.
Yeah, his story. It's heartbreaking, really.
It is. It shows exactly what can happen when you don't stay true to yourself.
But there's also a lot of courage in it, too, right? It takes guts to be authentic, especially when it's hard.
100%. And I think that's why Dead Poet Society just stays with you.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just some high school drama. It's about all of us.
It really is. We all struggle with wanting to fit in with expectations, with just figuring out, like, where we fit in the world, you know?
Totally. And it makes you think about all those what ifs.
The path is not taken.
The dreams we maybe kind of gave up on.
And is it ever too late to change? To start living a life that's true to you?
Yeah.
I mean...
Right. And we've talked about how challenging that can be. But what about the good stuff? What about those carpe diem rewards? What would Keating say is the payoff for actually embracing this whole philosophy?
I think he'd probably say the rewards, they're pay measurable, you know? And it's not about some trophy or achievement, although those things might happen. But it's about living a life that's just richer, I guess, full of passion, purpose, connected to yourself and the world around you.
It's like those scenes where the boys are all huddled in that cave.
Oh, I love those scenes.
Reading their poetry by candlelight. It just feels dot-free. Like they belong there, away from all the rules and expectations.
It's interesting you say that because the cave itself is like this big symbol, you know. It's hidden. It's almost not sacred. A place where they can finally take off those masks. You know what I mean? Just be themselves.
Yeah, totally get it.
And I think it reminds us that the most genuine moments, those times where you really connect with people, it often happens when we're our most vulnerable.
Authenticity over everything. Yeah.
Exactly. Just raw, real connection.
You know, it's funny how those little moments, those gatherings, they can mean so much.
They can really stay with you.
Makes you think about the spaces we make in our own lives for that kind of like real connection, you know?
Totally.
But going back to the film for a sec, there's this one scene I can't get out of my head when Keating makes those students stand on his desk.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's such a powerful image, you know? Like urging them to look at things differently, urging all of us, really.
And it really highlights how Keating approaches everything, right? Like, yeah, he wants them to question things, to find their own point of view, to literally, like, stand above the way everyone else is seeing the world. But at the same time, he's doing it within the very system he's pushing against. So it makes you wonder, like, how much can we actually carpe diem when we're still stuck in all these structures and expectations, you know?
It's that constant balance, isn't it? Trying to find a way to, like, break free while still living in the real world.
Yeah, and I think that's what the film is getting at, really. It's like carpe diem isn't some finish line you cross. It's this constant journey, questioning things, exploring, figuring out what it means to just be you.
100%.
And it's not always going to be easy, right?
For sure.
There's going to be setbacks, times where you have to compromise, moments where you feel like you're losing yourself a bit. But it's not about being like this perfect carpe diem person.
Yeah.
It's just about having the guts to keep trying, you know, even when things get tough.
Yeah, and even though the movie has those tougher moments, especially with Neil, it still ends on this note of hope.
It does.
Like when the boys, inspired by Keating, they make that stand. It's like they're saying, we see what you're trying to do, but we're not going to let you decide who we are.
That's powerful. And it's what makes this film stick with you, you know? It reminds us that even when we face loss, even when it feels like the world's trying to put us in a box.
We don't have to fit in that box.
Exactly. We can still choose to be free, to be ourselves, to seize the day and make it our own. And that's what Carpe Diem is really about.
Couldn't have said it better myself. As we're wrapping up this deep dive on Dead Poet Society, what's the one thing you really hope sticks with our listeners?
I hope they remember that Carpe Diem is more than just a saying, you know. It's a way of life. It's about using your own voice, even when it's scary. It's about challenging things, even when it's easier not to. It's about holding on to those dreams, those things that make you feel truly alive.
So well said. And for everyone listening, think about this. If you could go back and give your younger self one piece of that Carpe Diem wisdom, what would it be? What would you do differently? What would you tell yourself to hold on to? Let that question rattle around in your mind for a bit. Who knows? Might just inspire you to write a whole new chapter.